Hello, and welcome to the Doof Book Club, our monthly live stream discussion of a book chosen by you, our listeners. My name is Memorizer Matt Freeman, and I'm joined, as always, by my booklegger friend, Scott Daly. How you doing, Scott? Buried
I'm.
any books lately?
Oh yeah, you know what, man? They're just burying all kinds of books everywhere. I
Did
don't
you,
read them,
did,
but
are you marking where you're burying them? Okay, I knew we should have talked about this beforehand.
we were. Oh no. Hello everyone, and welcome. I hope everyone is having a wonderful Friday evening. I sure know I am. Um, I see some names. I see some. I don't. Well, I see your face. I don't see faces, but I see names. We hope you guys are having a good time. I am gonna say before we get started, please let us know how the level balance between our two mics are, because last month we were way off and nobody told us, and we didn't realize it until I went into the edit and found that we were way off. So please let us know. We're also having some weird technical stuff, so if you suddenly stop hearing Matt, also please let us know that.
Yeah.
But hello, I see John, I see Aqua. If anyone is new in the chat, hello. If you're joining us for like the very first time, oh my gosh, hello. We're Doof Media. I'm the D. He's the F, and we're all kind of collectively the
Ooh.
ooh. We make podcasts all about the stories that we love. We also arrange and organize and I guess lead this monthly book club. Matt, explain a club, please.
Well, each month, Scott and I select 5 books from a pool submitted to us by our wonderful Doof community. We set up a poll for all of our supporters over on Patreon at patreon.com/doofmedia and let them vote on which they'd like us to talk about. The book with the most votes wins, and then we all read it.
And then we meet here on the final Friday of the month and just spend an hour and a half, a little bit of time just chatting about the book. This is a pretty loose conversation, nothing too formal. We just like talking about stories, and that's what we're going to do tonight. Matt, what is the story that we're going to be talking all about this evening?
This book is called A Canticle for Leibowitz by Walter M. Miller Jr., and the summary of that book is as follows. In a nightmarish, ruined world slowly awakening to the light after sleeping in darkness, the infant rediscoveries of science are secretly nourished by cloistered monks dedicated to the study and preservation of the relics and writings of the blessed Saint Isaac Leibowitz. From here, the story spans centuries of ignorance, violence, and barbarism, viewing through a sharp, satirical eye the relentless progression of a human race damned by its inherent humanness to re-celebrate its grand foibles and repeat its grievous mistakes.
Spoilers.
No, it's all going to be fine. It's all going to be fine.
All right. I think this was a new read for the two of us, so I'm very curious what you thought about this book, Matt. And while Matt is letting us know what he thought about it, folks in chat, let us know. Had you read A Canticle for Leibowitz before? Was this a first read for you? And what did you think of the novel? Matt, how about you?
Yes, broad strokes, 5,000-foot view. I really enjoyed this novel. I think I loved it actually. It's got a lot of stuff in it that is sort of catnip for me specifically. I think Aqua already joked that once again we're discussing a weird book about religion and sci-fi, which it has. I was gonna say kind of our thing, but the truth is it's kind of 20th century sci-fi's thing.
Sure.
But this book is certainly that very much that, and I like that. I like that stuff. I think the book does a really good job. I will say that if Mr. Miller had sent me a draft of this prior to publication and I had a red pen, there are some sections where I would have crossed out some paragraphs or some pages.
Wow.
Or some sections. Trimmed things down a bit, which is not really the worst criticism in the world, I would say, because ultimately I think everything delivers. It has some amazing, impactful emotional moments and really interesting spiritual and philosophical and human observations that I really liked. I just in some cases felt like we took a little bit too long to get to those. So That's my overall take. What do you think?
Yeah, I think the most critical I can be of this book is that I did not order the mass market paperback version, but that's what they sent me on Amazon, and I don't like reading mass market paperback versions because my hands are big and I don't like books this small. I don't like reading this small. So that's the least thing I enjoyed about it, and other than that, like I really, really, really loved this book. I did. I think this is a lot of fun. Very, very intriguing and interesting. I really had, like Aqua is saying in the chat, I had no idea really what this book was about other than something religion and destruction of everything. And I didn't know about our basic structure where we're going to jump about 600 years in time between three different segments. I didn't know about that at all. So that was kind of a pleasant surprise to me as I went through it. And I mean, this is catnip for me, like we've talked about religion and storytelling and examining religion and knowledge and all these things. It's like this is the perfect book for me. So I really enjoyed it. I'm interested in kind of examining, not that I disagree with you of your, like, we did take a while to get there. I think that's generally true. But it didn't bother me that much. And the last thing I want to say is I'm very glad that Vatican II happened because, man, that's a lot of Latin. Y'all need to let the Latin go. I think after 1,800 years, we can maybe stop with the Latin, maybe.
Yeah, it's funny. I felt like I understood about half of the Latin, which is generally not enough to actually understand what people are saying. Although sometimes I did feel like I kind of got the gist anyway.
Yeah, I mean, some of it you can kind of get by context clues. Some of it they just translate for you in the text, and then some of it they don't. And I definitely like Googled a few things just to make sure I was getting it. Most of the time, like if I didn't understand it and I felt like I could get away with not understanding it, I just moved on. But there were specific moments that I was like, I feel like I really have to know what this means, and I don't. And so I paused and looked it up.
Yeah, it is funny that they did that they didn't just tell us what everything meant.
Mm-hmm. So do you know that, like, the kind of the backstory of this book, that, this was originally 3 separate but connected stories written in science fiction magazines that Miller decided to group together into a novel, and I think he beefed all 3 of them up as part of that process, but that's kind of the origin story of this book.
I did not know that beforehand. I became aware of that after I finished, and I read up on the book, so the time skips were a surprise for me.
Mm-hmm.
But I did not know it was a fix-up novel. I think as a fix-up novel, as a concept, it comes together pretty nicely.
Yeah.
I did find myself kind of disappointed when we got to the end of the first section, Fiat Homo, and our beloved brother Francis is unceremoniously murdered in the desert.
Extremely unceremoniously. Yeah, I hadn't realized what type of book it was at that point, and I didn't know we were about to move 600 years away from Francis, and so whether or not he's murdered in that moment is irrelevant. I mean, of course it's relevant, but like I was going to be losing him as a character either way, and so I was like shocked and was like, oh man, I liked him a whole lot.
Yeah, it's funny. I think I wanted to sort of report my trip report of reading this book because. At first, I was really bummed that we weren't going to have Brother Francis anymore. He was great, and the character that we moved on to, I didn't immediately like these new characters, and I honestly felt like we dove from this sort of whimsical and deeply human story about this young man who grew up as a monk, to like extremely boring politics talk. And I was like, oh no, I'm gonna hate this book. But then weirdly, or I don't know, maybe not weirdly, just what happened was I eventually came around on the character, primarily the abbot, but also kind of just got into what was going on in this little vignette, this third of the book.
Yeah.
And by the end of that section, I was really into it, and I was like, oh, I was wrong. They won me over. and then what's funny is the same exact thing happened again. That section ends. The second section ends. We move to the year 3781. It's a technological age, and the first thing we see is the abbot Zerchi just like ranting and ranting about the machine. And I was like, oh my God, this is even more grating than the last one. I hate this guy. And then once again, like with its focus on the like basic humanity and real struggles and empathy,
Yeah.
just kind of sucked me in, and I fell in love with Abbot Zerchi, even though he's kind of a bag of wind, honestly. But like
I have
you
so much to talk about that guy. Yeah. Oh my
yeah.
God.
Um, and then like the ending of the book where he is killed was to me probably the most poignant moment in the whole book. So it was just this funny like triple humped camel of enjoyment for
Yeah.
me, which is overall came out very positive. I just thought it was funny that I kept like slamming into a wall and then it would always pull me back in.
Yeah, I mean, there's one thing that's definitely true with me, even in some of like my favorite books of all time. The first like 10 to 15 pages are always a struggle for me as I'm kind of being introduced to the characters in the world and have yet to been really pulled in and invested in it yet. And what happened in this book was that happened every single time. So I like, as much as I loved every bit of it, yeah, I definitely in the two big time jumps felt like, okay, I gotta reorient myself, and I definitely took my largest breaks in reading like 5 pages into the next section because I was like, it's like, I don't feel like doing this now, and I closed the book and came back to it later. But as you did, I eventually fell in love with those characters and what the book was doing in those sections, and got really into it by the end, and then it's taken away from us, and then we got to do it all over again. But yeah, I mean, it seems like the reaction to this book is pretty positive from what people are saying in chat. John, it seems like, had read it before and loved it so much, compared it favorably to Cloud Cuckoo Land, another book we read and really liked, with the cynicism balanced with a genuine love of knowledge and those who preserve it. I think this is funny that like this, Matt, is the second book 2 months in a row that was written in the late 50s, early 60s that has a pretty pessimistic outlook on us, on humans, on what we are and are not capable of. Well, I mean, that's not entirely true. I think this book does in kind of conclude that, hey, we're probably going to destroy ourselves, and even after we destroy ourselves, we're probably going to do it again. And as long as there are people, we're probably going to destroy ourselves. But I do think it finds something beautiful and profound in people as well. And so, like, yeah, I don't think Miller thought great of humanity, and you know, learning who he was and what he went through in his life, I think makes a lot of sense. I don't know if folks know this, but he was a tail gunner during World War II. After Pearl Harbor, he like immediately enlisted, and was a tail gunner, and was part of an attack, like a fairly infamous bombing of an abbey in Europe that destroyed the abbey. And this apparently really fucked him up, and he like, I think that the line on Wikipedia was like, he had PTSD 30 years before anyone knew what that was. And he eventually converted to Catholicism, and I think a lot of what this book is born of those experiences. And of course the things that we were talking about and considering and afraid of in the 50s and 60s, that it really seemed like we were on the edge of a knife, and our two nations were just going to destroy each other and ourselves.
Yeah. And yet I think even now, you know, almost 75 years later, it feels relevant, right? Like, yeah, we didn't end up blowing ourselves up in nuclear war, but we still could, for one thing. And it never hurts to be reminded. You know, if anything, our current age might look even more in some ways like his, you know, future scenario than the world did in 1950, right? Because we have starships, no, but we do have a lot of the same technology, and we have some of the same political tensions. So it's good to be reminded of these things. I actually, you know, I think sometimes we become too complacent. Sorry, I wanted to talk about the you know, what you talked about, him converting to Catholicism. I sometimes feel, I don't know if I've ever said this out loud or even articulated it to myself in words, but you know, we read a lot of books that concern religious themes and spirituality, and usually I'm like, this is going to sound a little bit conceited, but I feel like I'm ahead of where the book is. I'm like, yeah, I did a lot of Sunday school. I know, like, I know these concepts. The author is not telling me anything I haven't thought of or I haven't been educated on already. Generally, 99% of the time, even really good books that I enjoy, I'm like, yes, I know that already. I'm familiar with that aspect of either Catholic scripture or just general Christian apologia or whatever. But it's cool that you worked it into your story. Good job. Pat on the back. Okay, so this book, he was way ahead of me. Like the sophistication of like the theological arguments and like the ways that the priests are thinking, and that the monks, like, this was a whole different level than I'm used to, and I really actually enjoyed the book, just like very earnestly and seriously taking on the perspective of this series of monks who have given their lives to a life of meditation and prayer and self-abnegation, and really making that seem kind of noble. I feel like we live in this postmodern age where most of the books we read, I feel they would on some level be sneering at that kind of character.
Yeah.
It would be sort of sarcastic. And this book, it's kind of guileless in a way that I found pretty refreshing.
Yeah, I think I agree there. I mean, it is we kind of get to see the politics, because like the church as it's represented in Catholicism and in this book is more of a government than it is anything else. But this abbey and this group of people is unique and separate from the Church of New Rome, right? In that they are kind of operating on their own personal mission that, of course, ties into their belief system and their spirituality. But I mean, it is interesting in this that supposed to be Catholic abbey, how little like we talk about Jesus actually. Because I mean, we talk a lot about Leibowitz, obviously, and we talk about we broadly talk about spirituality and belief. But this abbey has kind of taken the ideas of the Bible and Christianity and the morality of Catholicism and kind of laid it on top of this general idea of the importance of knowledge and conserving knowledge at all costs. And I think that's a very interesting little twist on things, right?
I agree, and I actually was wondering, I was hoping we would get to this in this conversation, because part of me wonders if there's not a reading of this book where it's actually like that was a mistake. like the monks would have been better off if they had forgotten about Leibowitz, never canonized Leibowitz, and instead of that just focused on Christ and forgiveness and atonement and not focused on saving knowledge. Because ultimately, what did the saving the knowledge get us? Got us right back to the same place where we figured out how to build nuclear weapons again. And no matter how, careful we felt we were being, we were like, well, we'll have rules about how we can build the nuclear weapons. And it led to exactly the same thing again. And it's hard to extricate that from the fact that the monks were the ones who preserved the knowledge that accelerated the development of physical theories so that they could get back to that point again.
Yeah, and I honestly don't know how to feel about that, because I mean, I think there is a part of the book's argument, at least, is that this kind of discovery is inevitable as long as there's a human being alive on the planet. Like, we will eventually figure this stuff out, whether we have to start from fresh or whether we have this pool of knowledge. One thing I find so ridiculous, and maybe I'm just trying to dodge your question because I don't know the answer, but like for the majority of the monks at the abbey, the understanding and dissection of the things, the books that they have and the knowledge that is stored there is kind of irrelevant to them, right? Mm-hmm. Like we have the one guy who is working on making a light, and there's this like real sense of conflict. I was like, why practically using the knowledge that we have stored here, that doesn't make any sense. Why are we doing this? That's absurd. That's ridiculous. And I don't know. I just like there's members of this group that are very curious and very interested in what this stuff means, and like kind of trying to, like, the one guy that develops this algorithm that can over time just predict what words are there on the burned pages, I think is really fascinating. But then there's other monks that just are completely uninterested in that whatsoever, and it's just like, I don't really care what this stuff means. It's important. Just the idea of preserving it is important enough.
Yeah.
And I don't know what to do with that.
Yeah, I like what John points out, which is the idea that, and I thought of this. I think the book kind of leads you to think of this. It's not like this that okay. So the book is sort of kicking you into a frame of mind where you're like, monks since hundreds of years ago were living like this, sort of in these cloistered environments, trying to basically act as a bulwark against what was a dark age, right? So it's there was high civilization, and there was a collapse, and then there was a dark age, and the monks lived in their abbeys, and civilization grew up around them again, and we got back into a technological civilization. And then what the book is saying, and then bam, we knock ourselves back into a dark age, and then the monks stay in their abbeys and they keep the knowledge, and we build ourselves back up into a technological civilization. And then, bam, we go back to the Dark Age, right? And it's just this cycle where the monks in their abbeys are going to be this persistent thing for, perhaps forever. It's kind of interesting to think about that, actually, and say, maybe we are doomed to just continue destroying ourselves over and over, although not destroying ourselves completely. And the role of the monks is to provide some kind of anchor of spiritual guidance throughout all those eras of turmoil and suffering.
Yeah, but I mean, one thing that's definitely true is the book is critical of as knowledge is proliferated, secularism rises, right? Like this is, I think, something that the book is like. There's a lot of. I think we should just say it outright. Like the three eras of this novel are representative of eras of our past as well, right? Like the beginning section of the book is supposed to represent the Dark Ages, the time immediately after the fall of Rome, and those hundreds of years, which apparently weren't as dark as we've been led to believe, but that's besides the point. The next area is the Renaissance, and then the last section is most closely supposed to match with present day. Of course, there are spaceships and things like that, but present it matches the Cold War. The Cold War that happens in 3700 Earth is supposed to match roughly with our Cold War. And so like there's this rise in secularism, and we feel like our characters are kind of fighting against this tide, and are kind of powerless to stop it. And again, this is like I loved reading this book, and I love the ideas that the book presented with me, but I sat down at this desk knowing we were gonna have to talk about this book, and there's part of me that's like, I still just don't know exactly what I should take away from my experience of this book. Like I want to spend a lot of time talking to you about the last section and kind of the euthanasia debate that happened in that section, because I think it's a really fascinating, perhaps, the way we can kind of try to dive into the details of what this book was saying and perhaps what it is ultimately trying to say. Because there's definitely, I mean, there's just a logical, like, part of me that's like, this father and his absolute resistance to the idea that people should be allowed to escape from incredible pain when they are terminal, like, that's ridiculous to me. Like, there's a part of me that's like, if people are suffering and there is truly no hope, they should just be allowed to choose when they go, right? Like, I don't have a problem with that, but there is a part of me that like also kind of gets what the abbots like real rejection of this idea was. So I'm really torn about this. I kind of know what you probably think, but um,
I mean, you probably know what I think, like for Matt, but I think from the priest's point of view, it's not a utilitarian, it's not a consequentialist question at all. He's not weighing the pros and cons. He's
no,
just saying this is anathema, this is murder,
yeah,
this is definitely just murder according to what we have been taught. And you can't, like, you and I can say, well, there's justified murder and there's different grades of murder. Like we can, between ourselves, we can say that, but within the frame of the Catholic Church, especially for a priest, it's just like, no, that's not something we're going to allow. And if anything, you sort of see it. I think maybe if you're particularly religious, maybe you even see it as like a kind of test, where it's like, this is a situation where euthanasia would be very tempting. This is the Lord testing us and asking us to not take that easy out. And I think that's what was like poignant about it to me, the ending, because he's talking about, like, he's clearly kind of upset by this idea. He tells the story about when he had a cat that he tried to put out of its misery.
yeah,
And how it was horribly traumatic for him, and he totally understands that the child is suffering, and he sees this all as just this like pointless evil. At the same time, you have to remember, like, and I know you do remember, but like the point is, he's a priest who earnestly believes in an afterlife of infinite bliss. So it's like, yeah, okay, the child is suffering, but they're going to be fine, right? That's literally what you believe if you believe in heaven. You believe, like, yeah, they'll be fine as long as you don't murder them. If you murder them, then your soul will be damned and you won't get to go to heaven.
yeah.
And for what? Like, you could have gone to heaven. What a horrible, pointless loss, right? Um,
Yeah, I mean, I agree. Like, this is actually the simplest argument in the world because, yeah, he's a Catholic priest. Like, suicide is a sin. Murder is a sin. You if you take your life, if you do that, you go to hell. It's pretty cut and dry. And but I do think, like, in this book, we're trying to ask these questions of on a more profound, deeper level, and I actually do really like. I think the way we kind of backdoor into what the book is trying to say about this particularly is this idea of mercy and comfort and security,
mhm.
and this idea the book is presenting to us that, like, civilization throughout the long history of mankind has been us striving for maximum comfort and maximum security, fleeing from pain, fleeing from suffering, bad things, right? Things that, yeah, I don't want to suffer. I don't want to be in pain. I don't want to do any of this. And we've all the choices we've made, both, consciously and subconsciously throughout history, have been to run away from this central idea. And I think Miller's conclusion here is, well, what that's actually doing is the opposite of what we want it to do. In this strive, I think he comes right out and says in the book, right, in this strive for maximum comfort, we cause pain. In this never-ending strive for maximum security, we are the least safe. And he sees this as kind of an inevitability. And the problem with that, like, I think that's a really fascinating idea, first of all. The problem with it is, like, I feel like security and safety and comfort are like biological imperatives of, like, all living things. And so it's like, okay, well, how the hell do we escape from that then? Like, we can't.
Well, I mean, I think you're right. I think that's maybe his take on that's what original sin is.
Yeah.
He does talk about original sin a bit. We
Sure.
have the idea of, that the only we do see a creature free of original sin in this book.
Yeah.
And
Oh, Jesus. I don't even know where to begin.
Well, I think this is pretty crucial, and I don't know either. I didn't come to some kind of specific conclusion about it, but I was just thinking like, yeah, it's the head that grew out of the shoulder of the tomato seller woman,
Rachel. Her
which
name's
is named
Rachel.
Rachel, and the head was an immaculate conception.
Mm-hmm.
Which the first time the priest sort of thinks this or dreams this, they're like, "Oh my God, what a blasphemous dream! I should pray. I should confess for having such a blasphemous dream." And then it just turns out to be exactly true, that this is in fact uh, a miraculous child who gives him a sort of gives him the Eucharist as he lies dying and sort of absolves him. And it's this beautiful moment. And again, the reason I mention that in this context is it really does feel like that's meant to be tied together, because he's lying there suffering and crushed and dying and thinking like, not in quite so many words, but thinking about the irony of how he was like, well, I did really strongly agitate for that mom and child to suffer at length instead of just getting to die, so I'm not going to give myself an easy out, certainly.
Yeah.
And he's lying there, and then and then Rachel comes and gives him merciful um but then, like, I don't know that I understand. I think, like you just said, I don't really know what we're saying with that. Like, the symbol, okay, I'll just maybe just tangent from that. Just like, I thought the symbol of the mutant caused by the nuclear fallout of the previous war generations later being the source of the Immaculate Conception was simultaneously like the priest says, like super blasphemous sounding, but also kind of incredibly poetic and weirdly beautiful.
Mm-hmm.
I just love that concept so much.
Yeah, I do too. I mean, I guess like the thing we should say here is that like there are multiple kind of I guess supernatural elements of each and every one of these stories, right? In the first story, we have the pilgrim, the wandering pilgrim, who is dressed exactly like Leibowitz. In the second story, we have the hermit, who is possibly the same guy. We're told the same guy. He believes he's the same guy, and I don't see any reason for us to doubt him in that.
Yeah.
And then he shows up again in the third section, very briefly, but then we also have the existence of Rachel. So it's like, I mean, God definitely exists in this story, right? Like, this is not a story, this is not a secular novel in any way, sense, shape, or form. This is a Catholic Christian novel in which God exists, and like, things happen. So I am struggling here, Matt.
Yeah.
I am struggling.
Well, I'm struggling too. I guess I'll just kind of say some of the thoughts that I was having, which is like, God and the Bible do not say that humanity gets to prosper and, spread out into space unto eternity.
Sure.
The book's pretty clear about what's going to happen, which is that it's all going to end. There's going to be a day of judgment.
Mm-hmm.
Like you said, the old guy's looking for the Messiah, basically, and he's frequently referred to as being Jewish.
Yeah.
So it's like he's not looking for Jesus. He's looking for a different Messiah, maybe.
Yeah. Yeah.
Maybe he's looking for the Messiah that's going to end the world. And
well, I mean, I think that like the Jewish belief, and I'm not Jewish, so this is rough. But the Jewish belief is that, hey, that Jesus guy was pretty cool.
Mm-hmm.
He was not the promised Messiah.
Right.
Like, and so, yeah, they are still waiting for, yeah.
Well, and the Christian belief is that when Jesus returns, it's going to be because the world is ending.
Right.
And like, which is a good thing in Christian theology, because we all get to go to heaven. Although, it may look bad on the ground, perhaps. I don't know. It's funny. I think a lot of different sort of Christian sects have a lot of different opinions about what the end of the world is meant to look like.
Sure.
so that's not, I'm not trying to get too hung up on that, but I'm mentioning it just to say, like, maybe that's what we're meant to take away from this. Maybe that's what the end of this book is the end of, the end of the world, but not necessarily the end of humanity, because humanity goes out to the stars, and that's our second chance, perhaps.
Yeah, sure, but also like we're bringing all the knowledge of the past with us, right? And
Hmm.
so, I mean, I love this idea that the abbot in the third section says, this idea that like the thing that he strongly wants to hold on to is like, we killed ourselves nearly the first time, but we didn't understand fully what what nuclear annihilation looks like. We didn't understand what the end of the world looks like. We didn't get it. And now we saw it, and we understand, and we know what it was like, and we know what it did, and we know all the terror that it caused. And so surely this time we can be like, okay, we dabbled in stuff we didn't fully understand. We didn't fully understand the consequences of it. Surely this time, with the knowledge of the consequences, we will not make the same mistake again. And then we did.
Yeah.
Then we did. And so yeah, I mean, I do read a little bit of hopefulness in our last character, knocking the sand off of his sandal, which is a specific Bible reference, and climbing onto the ship and flying out into the future, and to continue on not only the existence of humanity, but the existence of this religion and the things that they believe in and the importance they place in that. Like, there is some hopefulness to that, but there's also behind it this idea that, like, well, I don't know, let's see 1800 years from then, where will we be?
Yeah. Sure. I mean, I don't necessarily think it's, no, let me be clear. I think it's not like optimistic,
Mm-hmm.
really. I think it's more just like, yeah, this is the Catholic belief in sort of permanent guilt and original sin, where, the monks have this attitude where they're living their whole life. Um, this is one of those funny things about Catholicism as a thing that kind of sticks with you, is it's like, um, if you took everything really seriously, you should really be confessing and getting baptized, or no, not baptized, confessing and taking communion like every day,
Sure.
because if you don't do that, then you're basically committing sins constantly in thought and deed. And if you get hit by a truck walking across the street and you didn't confess and you didn't take communion, your soul is at real risk. And that's kind of the way the monks live, like that. Especially when we meet Brother Francis and he's really young, he has that kind of zealous, like, monomaniacal focus on things. And then what I like about that section is we kind of see him grow up and mellow a bit, and
Yeah.
just kind of sink into his role at the Abbey. And I really enjoy that, actually.
Yeah, I mean, his like kind of life work becomes this transcribing of a blueprint. The he has no idea what any of it means.
Mm-hmm.
But it's like, I really do love this kind of central idea of like, that knowledge in and of itself is important and beautiful, and just like, he doesn't have to know what this thing means to see the importance in it, and so to take it and want to make a version of it that the beauty of it represents the importance of it.
Mm-hmm.
I kind of love that idea intrinsically, and that's why it made me so sad when the guy took it. And
Yeah.
it was so sad. I was so sad for his beautiful little gold inlaid blueprint.
I know. I did just recreate it in AI. I'm going to post it in the Discord while we're talking. No, I agree. I thought that was beautiful. I think it's so funny that it's clearly a circuit diagram,
Yeah.
but he doesn't know what a circuit is and doesn't know what a resistor is, and so the description of it always involves like squiggles and springies and stuff,
Yeah.
and you're just like, that's delightful. It's a delightful description of a circuit diagram from somebody who doesn't understand any of the things they're looking at.
Mm-hmm.
I should put it in the Discord if anybody wants to see it, but yeah, I thought it was that's another, man, like there's so many, I think, like spiritually interesting, challenging moments, like
Yeah.
when yes, so the man took the original. No, the man took Francis's illuminated draft that it took him um, 15 years to make, and Francis is like understandably heartbroken about this, and then the Pope, who to a monk is as close to God as you can get, is like, look, that was probably good. It like what you did is you sacrificed 15 years of your life so that we could all collectively keep this artifact, which I think you would agree is of greater value. And in fact, you just did the illuminated version to sort of honor the actual um, relic. And this, and again, so this is what's so interesting is Francis is like, yeah, I guess, but I still feel pretty sad about losing the thing that I spent 15 years on. And then the Pope gives him the gold, and he goes back to get the illuminated one, and then he gets killed. And so you're like, okay, so you leave me no choice but to conclude that if he had just said, you know what, God wanted a sacrifice, and I sacrificed it, and it's gone, and I'll keep this gold, and I'll give it to the Abbey, and we'll feed some poor people, and I'll forget about that manuscript, that illuminated copy. Maybe he would have lived, which is like a terribly sad thing to consider. But I was thinking about that as we left that section. That's maybe even part of why I had a bad taste in my mouth going into the second section. Is I was like, is that what I'm supposed to take away?
Yeah, and I mean maybe, right? Like again, like it is very specifically kind of Christian and Catholic to this idea of, God works in mysterious ways. We cannot understand the ways in which God operates. We cannot understand the plan. All we do is kind of submit ourselves to his glory and the demands he asks of us. And Francis was selfish, I guess, a little bit. Like I don't know. Like, I mean, I do love the twist of this idea of, a person going to a priest or the Pope in this case and saying, I worked on, what is the meaning of my life? Like, that is essentially what he's doing, right? Like, I spent 15 years on this thing for nothing. What is the meaning? What is the meaning of my life then? And the answer is, well, like, here, look, I can show you the mystery of God's plan is that you saved the true copy by making yours so beautiful that it was assumed that this must be it. And then that, like, we cannot, I think that the general kind of spiritual question of is like, we cannot fully understand our place in the universe, is inherently appealing to me because it allows me to not constantly wonder, what am I doing? like what am I doing? Does this matter? Does what I'm doing matter at all? The things I choose to do with my day and my night, like, does any of it matter? And that is one way in which religion and spirituality and belief can be comforting. It's like, yeah, it matters. You might not fully understand the ways in which it matters, and sometimes God will show you the ways in which it matters, but sometimes he won't. And you're still going to die, and like your life is still going to be hard, and things happen that are still going to be cruel and unfair, and people are evil, people are awful. Like this sin of the world, original sin, is just us. It's just us being us. But you can find some meaning in it, and that the meaning is like the preservation of knowledge. That just like knowledge for knowledge's sake, that like information, that intelligence, that curiosity, that critical thinking, that all these things are indeed the most important things in the world. Man, I sure do like that.
Yeah, I find there's some beauty in it. It's funny because I feel like I'm contradicting myself repeatedly because I just said, like, I don't think it's optimistic, but like I don't think it's optimistic by my own standards of like what kind of future I would like to see for humanity, but it's sort of beautiful and optimistic by its own standards of like the kingdom of God is not this earth, and so the purpose of this earth is to sort of play out a story of human beings persevering in the face of incredible hardship, and then at some point the curtain will be closed, and then there will just be eternal glory. And that's kind of a, if you take that on its own merits, if you just if that's your worldview, like that is a beautiful picture of a certain certain philosophy on life. And yeah, so you are ennobled by your suffering. Well, actually, this kind of ties nicely back to this thing we were talking about before about the euthanasia, where it's like, if you really believe that the world is really just a kind of testing ground to see whether you're worthy to go to heaven, which is not quite exactly the way the Catholic Catechism would put it, but it's not that far off, then like it's really important that you do a good job bearing up under suffering. It's one of the most important things you can do. And trying to make things better for other people so they can bear up under suffering. And part of that, I think, is preservation of knowledge. And so it all becomes part of this tapestry where your ability to soldier on and cultivate that specific kind of meaning, it does become really beautiful and transcendent.
Yeah. I mean, I think it ultimately gets back to like, why do people believe in God? Right. Mm-hmm. Like, why does religion exist? Why do people believe in these things? Why do some people dedicate their lives to these ideas? And I think ultimately the reason is because it sucks out there. Like it's really hard out there. Even in the best of times, there is still countless suffering. And yeah, like this idea, this central idea that we are made for something more than this, and that by persevering through the worst instincts of humanity, we are gifted with something perfect and beautiful and everlasting. Like, of course, this was an incredibly intoxicating and easy to grasp onto idea. Like, it makes perfect sense, actually. Mm-hmm. And like, whether or not you believe in God and whether or not you believe in the catechism of the Catholic Church and the details and the dogma and the all this, the idea that the central idea that the suffering that I endure and the pain that is life sometimes is worth it.
Yeah.
Is incredibly powerful to me.
Yeah. I like to think about like why Christianity became such a successful religion, like ecologically, in the sense like stepping back from it. We had all these religions, and it's like, yeah, I think what you just said, it's like, if you live in a world where one religion promises you, like, yeah, if you sacrifice to Mithras, then Mithras will reward you with fortune, and then you sacrifice to Mithras, and then your whole family dies in the plague, then you're just like, you know what? I don't think that that's correct, actually. I think that Mithras is not reliable. And then there's another religion that really doesn't promise you. It doesn't say if you pray to God and you believe in Jesus that you will become rich. It doesn't say that at all. It says, hey, it sucks here. This place sucks. We're not going to make it suck less. Your duty is to try to make it suck less for others. That's your duty. But you're not entitled to anything. But if you do a good job, you get to go to heaven. That's a more it has features that I think are more adapted to an environment that sucks really bad, which the ancient world did suck really bad.
Yeah, and I mean, it's also like this idea that, like, if you listened to the teachings of Jesus Christ, this place wouldn't suck as much as it does. If everyone followed Christ and like, it wouldn't suck, actually. The followers of Christ are filled with the Holy Spirit, and the Holy Spirit allows you to commune with God, and you become one with God in this very important way. And if everyone did that, it would all just be awesome. And of course, that's never going to happen, because that's people. Like, that is an impossible task for anyone. But I think it does instill in some people, not all people. I mean, obviously, like, religion is like one of the most destructive forces that our planet has ever seen. But like it does fulfill in some people this great purpose of kindness and aid and charity and all these good things that we should be doing for each other no matter what. It does distill that in some people.
Yeah.
And like it's so fucking complicated, man. It's like there's like that just that's why I kind of find it endlessly fascinating of someone sitting down and just me sitting down and being like, well, what do I really think about this stuff? Like, what do I really think about it? Because I look around and I see like every day on this planet, every single day, something unspeakable happens to someone, right? The world is huge. There are billions of people here, and things that if I saw it, I would think about nothing else but it for the rest of my life happens every single day. Like how am I supposed to react to that? And then be like, oh, but people, like we're good, and like we're created by God, and God loves us all no matter what. And like no fucking way. Like it's so hard. It's so hard. And so any kind of story that like puts that front and center and attacks that and examines it. This is why I love Stephen King's Desperation so much, right? Like I think that's a very flawed book, but it's like it's attacking that central idea. I'm endlessly fascinated by it.
Yeah. And I think this book does a good job at not flinching away from that. Like, I mean, really every part of it is just this absolutely harrowing. I was surprised at how dark and depressing, like even Leibowitz, gosh, like I can almost pick any piece of the book and make the same point.
Yeah.
But I'm going to pick Leibowitz, who is a character who we only hear about. Forget the word for this. There's a fancy literature word for like a character who this character, but they never actually appear in the story. But it's like just this engineer who was alive during the end of the world, or at around our time, basically. His wife is killed in the initial bombing. He spends years looking for her, which is sad in itself. Wandering the wastelands, eventually admits that she's dead, and then decides to devote himself to the preservation of knowledge and becomes a monk, and then is betrayed during the simplification, which is
we need to talk about that. John mentioned that a few minutes ago, and we need to talk about that.
We should talk about the simplification, but just to end it, is betrayed and like horribly martyred. Martyred is the nice word. He's brutally lynched in a horrible way. And it's like, yeah, there's just like that whole thing is just sad. It's just a sad life and a sad death. And he managed to have some dignity and scrounge together some kind of meaning for himself. But at no point are you like, and it was all fine in the end. It's like, no, it wasn't fine. None of this was, at no point is anything fine for anyone. Poor brother Francis gets shot between the eyes with an arrow right after he did a thing that he was super proud of, and now he's dead, and it's over at the end.
Yeah.
No moral. So I just wanted to make this point that like the book isn't trying to say like, don't worry about it, it's fine, because no, it never does. It never takes kind of that cowardly way out, actually.
Yeah, I agree, but like also to the preservation of knowledge, I think also the preservation of people. Like, yes, this terrible thing happens to Leibowitz. It's awful, but he's, 1,800 years later is still remembered as this incredibly important person that began this whole thing of knowledge is important. We need to save it. We need the choices he made and the influence he had rippled out through history to almost thousands of years later. And that's incredible. And I think also kind of the same thing with Francis. I think one thing the book is doing, like the skull of Francis returns to us at the very end of the book, right? The skull of Francis is there at the end with the abbot as he dies, to give him briefly someone to talk to. And it's like, wow, this is this guy, this one dude who just living at this time, and yet the things he did and the the choices he made ripple into eternity.
Mhm.
Like that's kind of cool, actually.
Yeah, and in fact, uh, that's a great point. I was also just thinking about Francis and faith and certainty and the fact that he he's the one who sees the wandering Jew is in the
Mm-hmm.
who leads him to the documents, which then kind of lead to the canonization. But there's this thing where his abbot, who's another character I love, keeps basically interrogating him and being like, okay, so I'm going, when I step on your foot and say your name, you're going to say it was not Leibowitz that I saw in the desert. And he's just like, I don't think it was Leibowitz that I saw in the desert. And he's like, just why are you doing this? And I love this because it's like this is a fundamental, like this is, to me, I just love that so much. I'm having trouble articulating it, but it's like this is connected to this idea of faith, where he's like, I'm not going to profess something that I don't believe. I don't know that it was Leibowitz, and I don't know that it wasn't Leibowitz.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm going to be very precise about this. And like for all the fact that sometimes characters call him dumb, I think we're meant to take that as like, he's not actually dumb. He's very wise. He's very wise to stick to this line of, I know what I know, and I know what I don't know, and I don't know who it was that I saw in the desert.
Mm-hmm.
It might have been something supernatural.
Yeah.
And that gets him punished and prohibited from being a monk for 7 years.
Yeah.
And then they finally let him when it becomes clear that the canonization is going to happen. But like, I almost feel like part of the reason why the canonization happened is because he like had this like quiet policy of just like, I'm not going to be flashy about it, and I'm also not going to say that it was definitely nothing. I'm just going to be honest.
Yeah.
And this is turns out to be the correct path that kind of correctly deals with the whole canonization situation.
Yeah. No, I think that's absolutely right. Yeah. And so Saint Leibowitz gets to be honored as a saint. Which canonization is such a weird process, man. Like, it's so weird. I don't understand the Catholic Church's insistence on sainthood and this whole thing. It just seems like a lot of this stuff's just made up. Like, it's just totally made up.
It's kind of funny though. I never quite took this part. I never quite thought through to this point. But it's like by saying that Leibowitz is a saint, just for people who don't know and don't have years of Catholicism training, that means that he's in heaven, which is actually special because almost no one is currently in heaven according to Catholic doctrine. Only saints and the apostles and Mary and Jesus and so forth. Everyone else is in purgatory, waiting for the end of the world, or in hell. And so it's kind of a cool idea that it's like through the work of people like Brother Francis, they're able to take this man who suffered for the sake of preservation of knowledge and literally just put him in heaven. Magically.
Yay.
They
we did it.
See? It's great.
Yeah. Let's talk about the simplification.
Yeah.
I think this was a really, really the part of the book where it stops and kind of explains what happened post-nuclear annihilation, I thought was really great, actually. This idea that what started as kind of the remnants of humanity looking around and being like, hey, how do we make sure that never happens again, devolving into smart people bad, which itself devolves into if you can read, you're bad. I mean, it's kind of like a perfect, like, it's the French Revolution in microcosm a lot, like this thing that started as like an objectively good, like, hey, it seems like the system of government we have is broken and is leading to a lot of suffering. What can we do to make that better? And that's like, well, we could kill all the people that are responsible for us getting in this situation. And everyone's like, yeah, that sounds pretty good.
Yeah.
Let's do that. And then it devolves from there into just chaos and bloodshed and awful and a rejection of everything that is good, actually.
Yeah, I forget my history at the moment, but it really seemed like the Chinese Cultural Revolution where
Yeah, yeah.
it kind of, it took on a life of its own at a certain point where it's like, yeah, we had sort of a top-down policy about what we were going to do, and then it just became, yeah, kill anyone who's wearing glasses because smart people wear glasses, and kill anyone who has a book with them because yeah. Totally, like it's one of those horrible things where part of you feels like it's an absurd sort of satiric farce, or it's like, it would never be that bad, and then the greater part of you is like, yeah, it would, and literally has been.
Yeah.
That has happened actually. So not at all unbelievable that would happen again.
Yeah. But I love what John says here. I feel like Miller is also very unimpressed with willful ignorance. And I think that's true. I think this idea, like, yes, I think it's incredibly believable that this happened, but also I think Miller is just like, these fucking idiots.
Mm-hmm.
Ooh, that's interesting. It was written before the Cultural Revolution.
That is really fascinating.
Yeah, Jesus.
That makes it to me even more impressive because
it's sad how predictable we are. God.
Yeah, I guess maybe the only reference that he would have been reaching for would have been like the Luddites or something like that, where, but I don't think that was nearly as bad as the Cultural Revolution or the Khmer Rouge. So, wow, that's so interesting that he predicted that accurately.
Yeah. Oh, humans, we're pretty awesome. Yeah, I mean, I was watching I was watching a show called The Pit last night after having finished this book, and it was a bad like 1-2 combination because The Pit is a show taking place in an ER in Pittsburgh, and right now in the middle of the show they're dealing with a mass casualty event where someone decided to shoot up a concert, and so they're dealing with this influx of gunshot wound people. And I was just sitting there like both with this book in my mind and watching the show and just being like, we're really awful, aren't we? Like we just keep hurting each other. Like over, like it's just really sad. We just keep hurting each other and there's no end to it. I think we're just going to always keep hurting each other. And I guess what we have to do is find a way to live with that, I guess, and maybe preserve some knowledge as we go.
Maybe so. It's funny because there's a part of me that is kind of irretrievably like utopian, where I'm like that wants to say like, no, Scott, no, we will better ourselves and we will repair our nature and we will perfect humanity. And it's like, yeah, like Stalin wanted to do. Yeah. Yeah. Like every like truly horrific thing, the worst horrors of humanity, I would say some of them were in the 20th century and they tended to involve people who wanted to perfect humanity. So at this point, I agree with you. Let's just do our best and preserve some knowledge, and try to canonize the Beatus Leibowitz if we're able to.
Sure.
But
you just got to do a miracle. That's all.
You just got to
do a miracle.
Just got to have a miracle. By the time the book ends, I'm like, maybe he did commit miracles because there's clearly actual magic in the story.
Yeah, I don't know.
I will say this is going to be the briefest of tangents, but one of my favorite Neil Stephenson books is Anathem, which is about space monks. No spoilers. The book is much better if you go into it without spoilers. But after reading this book, I'm like, oh, I get where he got this idea now.
So there is, I did want to talk, like each of the 3 sections ends with focus on an animal, like in part 1 and part 2, it's the buzzards kind of eating our dead character and then going on with their day. Mm-hmm. And then part 3, it's the sharks who, it gets too hot and they just dive down into the deeper waters. Like I think this really kind of intriguing kind of idea of life itself going on here, that like, we do our thing, we destroy each other, we kill, and yet like life just kind of continues on doing its thing.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know what to make of that, but it seems like Miller definitely wanted this nature continues motif. Like the buzzards, they eat Francis and then they lay eggs and then they kind of just they just do their thing.
Yeah, I don't know that I have anything smart to say there. Something about like Genesis and the animals being made before man, so maybe
Yeah.
man will leave before the animals do. I don't know. I thought it was cool though.
Isn't Rachel a character from the Bible? I'm pretty sure there's a Rachel in the Bible, right?
There's a Rachel.
Does it have
in the
anything
Bible.
to do with our weird?
Yeah, I meant to look this up.
Yeah, I did too. I forgot.
Rachel was the favorite of Jacob's 2 wives and the mother of Joseph and Benjamin, 2 of the 12 progenitors of the tribes of Israel. There's probably all kinds of stuff about Rachel that we should know, but okay. Well, okay. This is all I got. So we got like Jacob was tricked into marrying Rachel's sister. So she has a sister. And here we have this idea of the 2-headed woman.
Mm-hmm.
She dies giving birth to Benjamin. I'm really trying to like put together something galaxy brained here, but all I really got is that she had a sister.
All right.
I'm not going to be able to figure this out on the spot.
Maybe he just picked a biblical name and nothing specific to the Rachel that is in the Bible matters here.
I will say it's a remarkably precise book. Like the sort of one of those books where there's not a misplaced reference or just like all of the detailed Latin and fun little puns and stuff like the flame deluge. And he clearly had a lot of fun like dressing up the idea of a nuclear holocaust in a bunch of religious language to make it seem like this was a divine punishment.
Mm-hmm. No, I agree.
I think I was just maybe I said this already, but I feel like the first part of the book was my favorite still, despite the fact that I did come around on the latter two and on the whole see the whole thing as a good unit. I think maybe even just the beginning of the book was some of my favorite stuff, where Francis finds the fallout shelter and he's like thinking about like he misunderstands the English sentence fallout shelter, so he thinks that there's fallout in the shelter and that fallout is taking shelter.
Demon. Yeah, fallout's a demon.
The demon fallout. Yeah. I love that.
I like that. I think it's interesting. I'll just observe here at the end that the one we spent the least amount of time on was the middle one. Mm-hmm. And it's not as if I didn't enjoy that. I did. And I mean, there's a lot of like politicking going on in there, right? And then like this kind of this battle between the secular scholar and the abbot as a religious figure, I think is really sorry, Aqua, I meant by we spent the least amount of time, I meant like us in this conversation, not the book spent the least amount of time in the second section. No, we talked about the second section the least. I think out of all the three. And I don't know why, like, I guess I just don't know what to say about it. I think the reason it just kind of ties into everything else we've been talking about, where like this push and pull, like I do find it really interesting the ways in which the different factions, like everyone in that argument sees the value in knowledge. Obviously, like an abbot who's abbot of a monastery that has like devoted its entire existence to preserving knowledge, like sees the value in preserving knowledge just the way the scholar does. But the way in which the scholar says, no, like we preserve it to use it and to apply it and to discover and to push forward. And what is it that he says? I think he says something to the effect of like, doesn't he say something to the effect of like, this is an inevitable, like progress is inevitable. But I can't remember like his argument for why they need to, they need like just locking this stuff up in the cellar of a monastery is the exact wrong thing to do with it. I wish I could remember exactly what he says.
Yeah, and I know the conversation you're talking about, but I don't remember that exact back and forth.
I wish I did. I wish I
Yeah.
did.
No, there's a lot of great stuff in that section. I really liked that character, the abbot during the second section where he's like basically dying of probably, stomach cancer or something.
Yeah.
And like just desperately trying to help the abbey navigate through this latest political crisis before he dies. I thought that was a great concept for a character. So one thing I appreciated about the book is you sort of follow the lives of these three consecutive abbots. Non-consecutive. These three abbots over a period of a very long time.
Yeah.
And they're all such different people, and the challenges they're faced with are so wildly different. And like in different ways, they suit the challenge that they're confronted with, and none of them are perfect, but they're all kind of admirable. That was an element that I really appreciated about the book.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I agree. I think it's interesting. Like the abbots are definitely like the main characters of the book, but like the abbot in the first section is not really the focus of the story until the very end of the. I mean, it's always kind of about Francis, but we do spend a lot of time. Like the abbot is kind of the antagonist at the early part of that story, and I kind of want to go back and reread that section, knowing that like the abbots are going to be the focus, because I was. Even when we were in the conversation with the abbot, I was mostly focusing on our clear protagonist of the whole book, Francis.
Right. I agree. I felt the same. But then I really came around on that character, because you realize at a certain point that everything that he was doing was for the right reasons, even though Francis obviously didn't grasp that at the time.
Yeah. Man, knowledge. It's good. I like, there is a part of me that like just generally is like, everything we've learned needs to be saved. All books, like the idea that this fact that we have so little of like books that existed, like the Library of Alexandria conversation, right? Like these ancient texts, one of a kind, that were destroyed and we just don't have them anymore, drives me crazy.
Yeah.
Like, I hate it. And so like I do just generally have utmost respect for just this strong belief that we need to preserve everything, and the abbey and the monastery and the order kind of translates there. We need to save these ancient texts, evolves over the course of time to we are the keepers of knowledge, and we need to record everything and save everything and make sure everything is passed on. I'm like, hell yeah. Like, it also really bothers me that there's all these movies. There's hundreds and thousands of movies that were made in the 10s and 20s and 30s that are just gone. There's just no copy of them anywhere that exists. And like that's like, how can that be? But it is.
That's horrifying.
Yeah.
Why are you telling me this? What are you doing to me?
I think preservation is like one of the most important jobs, and like, it is immensely cool that we live in a world now where like storage space is no longer a premium, and we can digitize so much of history and knowledge and all these things. But also that's also inherently terrifying, because if we digitize everything and have nothing physical anymore, and then something happens, it's like, fuck.
Yeah.
Is all that gone?
Yeah. So I do want to take a second to talk more about the second section, because I agree that it is unique from the other two sections, where I found myself thinking several times like, oh, you could do a whole book that was just this. You could do a whole book just following around Thonthadeo and being like, he's going to rediscover physics and engineering. And he's going, he's a genius. He can create, he can theorize, but then he comes across this. Like, I think another one of my favorite moments is when he's like, I forget if he's giving a lecture or what he's doing exactly, but he reads something which is basically, it's just it kind of reads like a section of a textbook.
Yeah.
That it like presupposes your familiarity with the ideas of relativity. And he reads it and he's like, so this kind of seems like either complete nonsense or it is treating concepts that we currently treat as absolute bedrock as like variable in a way that we never considered would be possible, and like how seriously should we take this? And it's like, wow, what you know, imagine having access to this kind of stuff and being like, okay, now I have to figure out how to interpret this.
Yeah.
Like that's just to me an intrinsically like fun situation for characters to be in.
Yeah, it's a very fun sci-fi concept to like think that of these records, like just these pieces and bits of things that treat stuff that is just everyday knowledge to us that we just generally accept as things they don't know about. And so we don't baseline everything with the previous knowledge, because when you're writing something specific, the aforementioned knowledge is aforementioned. We don't have to mention it here. And so you have to like piece together, like, yeah, that's just a really fun sci-fi concept of like, how would a person piece together knowledge of how technology works and science and all these things that we all take for granted. How would you piece that together based on bits and pieces of writing that are treating those things as, you know, something that is, yeah, we understand that. We know gravity. We get that. Yeah.
Yeah, and then imagine that you have scraps of historical documentation that are from different eras, and you don't necessarily know like this supersedes this.
Mm-hmm.
You know, they thought this was true, and then they later figured out, nah, it's not quite right. It's actually this, and you don't know that. You just see two different things that appear to contradict. That's so fun. I love that.
Yeah. It's a lot of fun. It's a fun book. It really is. It's a depressing book, but it's a hopeful book. I like, what is it that John said earlier? Let's scroll back. Something to the effect of like, gosh, why is chat so hard? That he found the book, ending a book comforting, not necessarily like positive, not optimistic, but not dour and cold.
Yeah.
And I like that. I like that.
I like that too.
Yeah. All right. So that is A Canticle for Leibowitz. I don't know what I expected of this book going into it, but I definitely enjoyed it. And I like this conversation as much as I struggled and stumbled my way through it.
Yeah. Thanks everyone for voting for this one. Finally.
Finally. All right, so that is A Canticle for Leibowitz. We didn't talk about the vote at the beginning of the episode today because this is going to be our semi-annual We Pick 'em, and we have picked a book that has been up for a vote before but didn't win, and it made me really sad, and so I decided we're just going to read it. And that book that we are going to read is the classic Western that I've been wanting to read so long, Lonesome Dove. So we're going to be reading Lonesome Dove. Matt, have we officially decided? I guess I'm just going to decide right now. Lonesome Dove is a very long book. It's like 900 pages. It's a big, thick boy, and we want to make sure everyone has time to read it. So I think what we're going to do is we're just going to skip the month of April, and we're going to meet up again at the end of May. So we're going to give everyone 2 months to read this monster of a book. And so we'll meet up at the end of May on May 30th, May 30th, the second to last day of May, and then we're gonna meet up to talk about Lonesome Dove. I've heard nothing but good things about this book. Like, not only one of the best Westerns ever written, supposedly, but just a great novel of American literature. So really looking forward to it. I don't think I've ever read a Western either. Have you read a Western? I've seen like the spaghetti Westerns on like forever. I've watched Westerns forever, but I've never read a Western.
I mean, Blood Meridian is sort of a Western, sort of.
Is it?
And I read a book about the Alamo, which was historical fiction, which...
Does that count as a Western?
Probably not. I mean, I don't know what a Western actually is, so there you go. There's my answer.
Does this book have Clint Eastwood in it?
I don't know. Probably not. I don't think it's that kind of Western.
All right. So yeah, Lonesome Dove will be back in May. So everyone enjoy your April. Maybe if you're a fast reader and you're like, oh, I could read an 800-page book in a month. Well, I don't know. Read something else.
Yeah. Just keep up with us on Flanagan's Wake, and then that'll fill up.
Oh
your
yeah,
reading
we're gonna
budget.
be the month of April. We are gonna be reading The Haunting of Hill House by Shirley Jackson over on Flanagan's Wake. So read that book with us.
Yes, Shirley Jackson is fantastic.
She is fantastic,
as everyone is aware, because we read a Shirley
Yeah.
Jackson book on this podcast as well.
My wife gifted me this absolutely gorgeous folio edition of The Haunting of Hill House when we started this podcast as like a celebration on starting your podcast. And I'm gonna read this version, but I'm being like very careful. Be very because this is a very pretty book. And I don't
Sounds
want...
good. It is.
All right. So yeah, thank you everyone who came and hung out with us and for the difficult conversation. But I've really enjoyed it. So if you are listening to this after the fact, please come hang out with us in a couple months when we talk about Lonesome Dove.
Yeah. If you like what we do here at Doof Media and you want to see more of it, then head on over to our Patreon at patreon.com/doofmedia and consider donating to support our organization. At any level, you'll get access to the vote for the books that we talk about each month, as well as a bunch of other cool exclusive features. So go check that out.
Yeah, when we do that. Not this month, or I guess next month. But after that, we'll definitely... Right. If you have any questions or comments or just want to reach out to us and say, hey, you can always find us on Instagram at Doof Media, on X, no longer owned by Elon Musk X. Did you hear the news?
It's owned by
He sold
XAI,
it. He sold it to himself.
He sold it to himself, so he owns it through a different entity. So
and yet got money out of it somehow. Isn't our system rules? This is great. You can email us at doofmedia@gmail.com, and you can find us on Reddit, reddit.com/r/doofmedia. Yeah, make sure you check out Flanagan's Wake. We are going to be covering the Gerald's Game movie this upcoming week. So take a look at that on Netflix, and then come chat with us about Gerald's Game, and then Lonesome Dove in a couple months. So have a good weekend, a good month, and we'll see you in May. Bye-bye.
Bye.
Thanks, y'all. That was good. I really struggle with that. I appreciate. This is one of those ones that if it was just me and Matt alone talking about it, I was like, oh god. But you guys really helped focus the conversation a little bit. I appreciate that.
Yeah, 100%. I didn't know what this conversation was going to be like.
Nope.
I really enjoyed this book, but I didn't feel super clear on what we were going to talk about. So yeah, thanks for coming.
Oh, William says Wizard and Glass gets credit as a Western. Yeah, I think that's fair. Yeah. How did I not think about the Dark Tower? I'm ashamed.
Yeah. Right. I mean, possibly the Gunslinger too. Right.
Yeah, I think so. At least like half the Gunslinger. Like the Gunslinger starts as very Western, and then it moves on from there.
It does move on.
Have a good weekend, everyone. We'll catch you later.